Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Sacred Masculine class with the Aries God archetype, the fierce protector. We're looking at the ninth labor today. This is the last labor before Mars goes into the underworld. My name is Sophia Mona Lisa, and this class is being offered through the Rose Wheel Mystery School. Now, today is the day before the full moon in Aquarius, August 21st. And this labor activation took place earlier in the month on August 9th. And look at this. I love these sevens. 7-degree Virgo, 7 minutes, 7-7. So if anybody's into numerology and you know what the master number 7 is all about, it'd be interesting to hear about that. Are you aware of what that is, Maureen? I guess we could Google it really quick and see what the master number 777 is. Hold on just a second. Let's see what it is. My fingers are having a challenge typing. All right, here we go. Masters of spiritual energies. Isn't that interesting? They are challenged to contact their inner soul through silence. Known for their wisdom, they work to understand and then live by the spiritual principles of the earth. That's according to Egyptian numerology. So that's really spectacular, because for this labor activation to be engaging that mastery of spiritual energies is really significant when we think about, you know, we're in this other world. We're not in the quote unquote real world. We're in this other world, this, what is the word that they use to describe that, Maureen? The other world. There's another name of it I'm trying to remember. It's not coming to me.
No, me neither.
Anyhow, so we're in this other world. We're going through these labors, and now this is the ninth and final labor before we have that approach to the inmost cave. I think that's happening before Mars goes into the underworld. This is the approach to the inmost cave. So you have to have some kind of spiritual mastery when you're going into the cave, right, Maureen?
Yes, you do.
So it's fascinating to me that this activation engaged the frequencies of that master number 77. So this is a whole new phase of the hero's journey that we're going to be engaging with this class. Because while we're still in the initiation act, right, the second act of the 3 acts, we are coming out of the tests, allies, and enemies step into the approach to the inmost cave. This is a whole new step, a whole new dynamic in terms of what we're going to be engaging with energetically at this labor. So we're going to take some time to talk about what is that approach to the inmost cave. And then also this month, the day after the full moon, so on Monday, August 23rd, that's the day that Mars is going into the underworld. That is completing this labor activation is completing phase 2 of the Mars synodic cycle. And when Mars goes into the underworld, we're starting phase 3 of the Mars synodic cycle. So phase 2 is a very, very long phase of the 6 phases. So also with the hero's journey, when Mars goes into the underworld, we're engaging a new step in the hero's journey, the ordeal. So we'll have some slides on what the ordeal is about. We'll have some slides on what Mars in the underworld is all about. And really, this is kind of a precursor for next month's class, because we're looking at the chart for the 9th labor that was activated on the 9th of this month. And this is being activated on the 23rd, but we're going to dig into those aspects and what was activated on the 23rd next month. And you'll see why when we get into looking at what this Mars and the underworld is all about. Very similar, Maureen, to when we were in the Gemini goddess journey, looking at moving from the descent phase into the Inanna underworld phase, where we moved into the descent phase and then we were in the underworld, both activations happening in the same month. But we did the first chart 1 month and we did the move into the underworld the second month. So you'll see that similarity. So this is our agenda for today. All right, so yeah, we're going to look at the aspects of the chart related to the ninth labor before we look at the ordeal and the surrender to the underworld related to this event on the 23rd. That way we can kind of keep it separate and not confuse ourselves in terms of what we're talking about.
Okay. Could we pause for a moment? I have to take care of something out. I'm sorry. It just
no
came.
problem. Okay, so now we're ready to establish our grounding and spiritual fortification. So we'll just take a moment to close our eyes, get settled in where we're sitting. Feel your hands resting gently. Okay, so just taking a really deep breath into the belly. And allowing the exhale to just pop out. Another deep inhale into the root chakra, the tailbone. Allowing the exhale to pop out. Another deep, deep breath into the Earth Star chakra. Below the feet there. A couple more breaths into the Earth Star chakra. Feel the breath coming into the Earth Star chakra, the Earth Star chakra connecting with the heart of Gaia. Feeling yourself relax. The more that you receive the energy from the Gaia, the more your body is able to relax. The body begins to feel held. Feeling completely supported by the Earth Mother. So we claim this space for the Sophia Christ consciousness. We call in our higher selves, our inner Christos Sophia. We call in our mentorship councils, our galactic teams and spiritual allies. We call in the angels and archangels and the devas and elementals and the animal totems and medicine. And so it is. We thank the goddess Diana for putting her full armor of spiritual protection and fortification upon us. And so it is. And I command forward that all dark and negative entities that may be attempting to interfere or cause distractions through any wireless devices, any cellular devices, any 5G devices, any scalar energy devices are to be immediately shut down, destroyed, and eliminated for all eternity. And so it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So just speaking to that last piece, because our sacred feminine class was of such high truth and frequency that we received a lot of attacks from the dark side, experienced a lot of interference. So just adding a whole new layer of protection for us. So today, because the activation of the ninth labor engages Osiris, we're going to do an invocation to Osiris. So whenever you're ready, Maureen.
Hear me, Osiris, for I am true of voice. Come forth to dwell in thine image, that I may adore thee and converse with thee. Osiris, Lord of the Black Land and foremost of the Westerners, thee I invoke. Those whose skin is green like the leaves of the lotus, thee I invoke. Thou who bearest the crook and the flail crossed upon thy breast, thee I invoke. Osiris, slain and risen, eternal living God, thee I invoke. Ruler of the duat and Lord of resurrection, thee I invoke. Thou who hast brought the secrets of civilization to the world, thee I invoke. Lord of the fertile waters, who brings forth the vitality of the earth, thee I invoke. Osiris, King of kings, Lord of lords, ruler of rulers, thee I invoke.
Thank you
So
so
it
much,
is.
Maureen.
Yes.
So this is
powerful.
Osiris.
Yes.
It's, it's hard to find images of Osiris that aren't kind of make believe out of some kind of type of creative graphic type
Yeah.
imagery.
It's interesting that it is noted here when Osiris is invoked that the skin is a different color.
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought about that as a real possibility, that he was in fact green, or symbology of being green.
Right. Well, and
I
go ahead.
No, I said I just don't know, what I've seen his face painted green before, but I don't know if that is real, how he appeared, or if it is in fact a representation of his fertility, the fertile waters that made all the green around the Nile. I don't know.
And that very well could be. And what comes to me is through this particular phase saying green like the leaves of the lotus. And so, when we go back to our shamanic priestess teachings, we learned that the sacred masculine serves and supports the sacred feminine.
Feminine, yeah.
And if you think of the lotus as a representation of the sacred feminine, then the leaves that the lotus sits in would represent the sacred masculine serving and supporting the sacred feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this is just a synchronicity that this person here at this particular website chose those words, if he was inspired to those words for the reason that I'm for a similar reason, a similar interpretation from what I am receiving through that distinction. I don't know. I'd be very curious to find out about that.
It is. Yeah, it is interesting. find out about that.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you're a great researcher, so if
I'll look at it.
if
Yeah.
and when you find something, be sure to share it with me.
I will. Yes. Mm.
Okay, so here are our creative energies this month of August. So I've highlighted here August 9th. That's when this sacred masculine activation took place. And, you know, it took place the day after the Lion's Gate and the new moon. So this activation is very much encoded with the energies of the Lion's Gate and the new moon. And in case you're not aware, for whoever may be watching this after the fact, I did write a blog post about that. And here's the link here if you want to go into it and looking at that. Also, I just recently put out a blog post related to the event that happened after the sacred masculine activation on this Venus opposition to Neptune called Unveiling Sophia. So there's the link to that if you would like to see what I wrote about that. So here we are. Tomorrow is the full moon at 29 degrees Aquarius. Remember that the full moon illuminates the consciousness of what was planted, what seed consciousness was planted at the new moon. So a lot of people are going to be experiencing a very powerful, energetic expansion through this full moon, because at this new moon, we had the Lion's Gate. So that's going to be really powerful. And also because it's the second full moon in Aquarius in a row. Last month, July, it was at 1 degree of Aquarius. This month, it's standing at 29 degrees of Aquarius. And by so doing, it's activating this Mars-Jupiter opposition at the very same place in the sky. And then tomorrow, after the full moon, the sun will enter Virgo, because remember, the full moon is across the sky. The sun is across the sky from the moon. So at the full moon of Aquarius, the moon is in Aquarius, the sun is at 29 degrees Leo. But right after that full moon on the same day, then the sun moves from that 29 degree point of Leo into 0 degrees of Virgo, the next sign. So all of that's happening tomorrow. And then the very next day is when we have Mars entering the underworld. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when I get to the slide. But in the Mars signatic cycle, the event that marks Mars moving into the underworld is when the sun and Mars are at a 15-degree orb from each other. And that's because, you know, the size of Mars, the proximity of Mars to the sun, the speed of Mars, when they're within 15 degrees, the sun hides Mars. We can no longer see him in the sky. And when we cannot see the planets in the sky, that means that they are now in the underworld. It's the same thing with when Venus goes into the underworld. When she comes within 10 degrees of the sun, we can no longer see her. That marks her moving into the underworld. So what's really interesting is we've got this Mercury opposition to Neptune coming up next week. And so, you know, Mercury's the cosmic messenger. Neptune is the pipeline to the unified source field. So, you know, bridging heaven, Pisces, and earth, Virgo. So what messages may you be receiving straight from the unified source field 2 days after Mars enters the underworld? So I would mark that down on your calendar, maybe do a little ritual or meditation around that to see what kind of messages you receive. what's interesting as I look at it, we've got this 22 degrees, 22 Virgo, 22 Pisces, and we know that 22 is the number of the Magdalene. So that's interesting.
Yes, it is.
So, all right. So we're going to do some closure now on the 8th labor from last month. The mares of Diomedes. That kind of took a whole turn that we did not anticipate. And I'm just pointing out here on the slide that 8th labor was the last labor within the test, allies, and enemies step of the hero's journey. So, Maureen, what do you have to say around everything that came up about this labor in our class last month?
Oh. Well, it wasn't an easy class because it represented a lot of things that we do not support, such as the consuming of flesh and the practice of taking a lover that is underage. So in this day and age, that would be called pedophilia. So to learn that Hercules had these flaws that we had not brought forth with Mars labors, with the hero's journey, was particularly disturbing. And I think what that actually points out, what he is pointing out, interestingly enough, is what is going on in the world currently that we need to face. And that's never easy when it's this controversial.
Right.
What do you think?
I agree with you. And as you were talking, something else kind of came into my mind related to what we've been discussing in the Sacred Feminine class and the ascent journey of Venus and this emergence of Sophia through us as the second coming of Christ. So we know that Hercules, and I don't think we've specifically spoken to this about Hercules. The reason he has all of these superhuman gifts, supernatural gifts, is because his mother is human, but his father was a god.
So he's a Titan.
Zeus. And so what we're really seeing here in terms of humanity is a being that is human and divine. And then in our humanity, we have frailties. And we can overcome those frailties to embody and embrace our divine self. And so I find it to be an interesting synchronistic timing where we are in the Mars journey, where we are in the Venus journey, that this idea of being both human and divine, which I didn't see that when we were talking about it in the class, but now as we're getting ready to approach the inmost cave, we're tapped into those frequencies of 77, spirit, the mastery of spiritual energies. It's so obvious to me that I'm surprised I didn't see it in the last class.
Yeah, the divine and the human. There's a lot of them, a lot of Titans that be interesting to look at more of those myths and see what they bring up. Because if you're not aware of it, right, then you can't overcome. You have to be aware of the frailties. So
right.
So he's not a perfect specimen. I mean, he's strong and he has all the internal gifts that he needs, but he still has things to overcome.
As do we all, which is why when we go into the underworld, we're confronted with our shadow aspects.
Yes. And it seems like in my world, I'm always confronted with my shadow. I mean, almost every single gate for Venus, every single labor for Mars, it seems like there's shadow. I just see it. It's probably because of the Scorpio and Pluto I have when there's significance in my chart, that it's just kind of like a beacon, you know. I have to look at that.
Right, right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, and again, let's speak to that a little bit deeper, because it's significant, especially as we're going on Monday, surrendering to the underworld. Both of us have a Scorpio overtone for our inner feminine. That overtone with Scorpio, it ruled by Pluto, is all about, alchemizing the shadow pieces within us, providing the mirror to show others their shadow pieces so that they can help alchemize their own pieces. So shadow work and seeing shadow, having people project shadow onto us is a big part of the path that we walk, because we've got this Scorpio goddess overtone. Now take that up a notch. You've got Scorpio ascendant ruled by Pluto. That's who you know yourself to be, that alchemist, that magician, right? That can take the lead of shadow and transform it into the gold of spirit, of enlightenment. And then you've got Pluto in the 10th house, the work that you're known for. Pluto, the Lord of Scorpio. This is the work that you're known for, is being able to take this shadow, this darkness, and turn it into light. It's in Leo, a fire sign, the compassionate heart, being able without judgment to just take it and transmute it, alchemize it, turn it into light, purify it through that fire. So yes, you are always, always going to be seeing it and working with it.
Which I like to do, which is fortunate.
Which,
yeah,
which is,
I've never run from that, and I'm very proud of that fact.
yeah, as you well should be. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what makes you such a great shadow dancer. So we had talked about in the last class, this whole concept in terms of, the flesh eating. You had talked about, shifting to a more vegetarian diet. And you were going to see about how, just besides the fact that you've got people in your home that may not have that same interest, how you were going to start to incorporate that for yourself. How did you do with that?
It's really difficult. I've always eaten meat. It's just been a part of my diet since I was little. And so changing it now at this point is really hard, because as you say, there are people in my home who do not subscribe to that at all. But we have managed to incorporate vegetarian meals into our week. Not all, but some. And that is good, I think. Yeah.
It's absolutely good, Maureen. It's a huge step forward.
And then, if I fix meat, one of the things I'm trying to do is to make sure there's enough protein for me to eat without eating the meat, because I don't eat a lot of meat anyway. If we have a steak or something, I'll have maybe 5 pieces. So that's not very much. And then I try to eat other things, steamed vegetables or a salad, something that doesn't need meat and still
Right.
has a nutritious value. That's a challenge for me, but I'm working on it. I mean, it is foremost in my consciousness. It's interesting about the allies, the tests, and the enemies with this labor, because I think that's one of the tests, is how I feed my body, the physical aspect of it. Where are the allies for this? And enemies come out. All of a sudden, there's enemies that will directly try to sabotage this.
Right.
And I think you've come up with a couple of times that a person or persons that you thought were aligned with you are not.
Right.
And so while you may not classify them as enemies, they are definitely not allies.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I absolutely agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. When we were talking about this in the last class, I had told you how I had been vegetarian for a month or two. I had shifted to vegetarianism. But what I did do, and I don't recall if I spoke to it in the class, is after that class is I shifted from vegetarian to vegan. And so now I've been vegan since then.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And so for people who don't understand the difference between a vegetarian and a vegan diet, a vegan diet does not include any animal products. So not only are you not eating hamburgers anymore, but you're no longer eating dairy products, cheese, cream, milk, yogurt, sour cream that comes from milk that comes from an animal. So, you're not eating eggs because they come from an animal. Some people even go as extreme as not eating honey because it comes from an animal. So that's the difference between vegan and vegetarian. And so I did make that choice for myself. And I will confess, not from a spiritual perspective, but I discovered as a person whose body has a lot of estrogen, that being vegetarian wasn't sufficient for me, because it turns out that all of these dairy products are laden with hormones, because when the cows are producing milk, they are pregnant most of the year. And so all of those hormones not only are going into the flesh, so when you're eating meat, you're getting the hormones, but they're also going into the dairy products. And so that was a huge concern for me in terms of trying to work on getting my hormonal balance in check, and recognizing I was being sabotaged in that effort by eating those dairy products. So, but I'm committed now to this vegan diet. And so that's just another step forward, away from eating animal products, than even shifting to just vegetarian. And because you mentioned this, I'd like to speak to a false premise that's out there in the collective. And that is that we have to eat meat in order to get enough protein. Yes. And that's the false premise. Plant food provides more than enough protein for us. If you look at the large beasts that walk our planet, the elephants, the silverback gorillas, giraffes, on, these are plant eaters, and they are getting enough protein to support their growth, to make these massive muscular bodies. So that's just something, because you mentioned it in terms of your concern of being able to consume enough protein, that I wanted to speak to. And it goes back to what I said earlier. One of the first mistakes that people make when they choose to go vegetarian is that they're eating like 80% grain-based foods and 20%, vegetables. And then you're not going to get enough protein. It needs to be reversed, like 80% vegetables that have the protein in it and maybe 20% grain. So just wanted to mention that, because I've fallen into that trap myself. I've learned the hard way. So I'm not sharing that wisdom from a preachy position, but from having learned through trial and error the truth of that.
Well, that is good. That is, yeah, I believe that. I just have to make sure I prepare enough. If I'm not going to eat the meat, I have to have enough side dishes that I can have a healthy meal. And I have to be really careful of sugar.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm working on too.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. So looking at these Leo traits at this labor, are you able to tap in to see how any of the shadow side of Leo may have shown up for you, that you were able to alchemize into these positive characteristics?
Well, I'm dealing with an egotistical, as a human, an egotistical approach, changing that into ambition, and creative, but having to step aside as an ego, what my human ego tells me, not that I'm wonderful, but that it does get in the way with preconceived ideas. Yeah, I'm not vain at all. That's not something that's come up, even in my household. There's not much vanity, but there is an ego thing going on. And so maybe an overbearing that I've been working with, not me, but being in that situation. So I would say I've been working mostly with the creative, ambitious, dynamic area, not the ego. Because if I come from the ego, then it doesn't work out. Yeah. It just doesn't. And that was the case with my, I don't feel ridicule either. I don't fear that. So I'm doing okay in those things, but I do need to get my ego under control, because the ego wants to know. It can't help it. That's what we do. And I am, as I have said, addicted to information. So what I have to do is to move that over into the other column and be creative and ambitious, enthusiastic, without getting in my own way. That is not easy.
Right.
And I've had to put things aside now, projects and whatever, because it wasn't right. It wasn't coming from the right source.
I hear you. I hear you, and I validate you. That is a huge test, a huge trial.
It is, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For myself, since childhood, and my, how families tell stories. And of course, one of the big stories about me is how stubborn I was. But I know how stubborn I can still be. And so, being aware of that stubborn tendency, and shifting it into a more decisive, confident space, as opposed to that more really kind of dug in. I mean, I can see how stubbornness can even kind of shift into overbearing if you won't, if you're the dog with the bone and you won't let go of the bone kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for me, letting go of some of the issues that show up, well, I would say some of the synchronistic unfoldings that trigger that stubborn streak, and then getting a hold of it and not wanting to let it go.
Yes.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
So is there
That's good.
Yeah.
Real good.
Easier said than done, right?
Oh, well, it is very much a test. Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes, as we said, we can be conscious and we can shift when, in the moment when we become aware of it. And other times we're like the tar baby fighting against ourselves.
Fighting against ourselves, and then being aware that that's what's happening. Where is this coming from? What is the source
Yes.
of this issue?
Yes.
And if it's coming from, like I was saying, ego, or stubborn, a dog with a bone, or whatever, if you're just even aware,
right,
of the stages of those things, like ego has several stages that you can be sourcing from. Childlike, the what we consider to be the rebellious teenager kind of ego thing, all the way up until you finally mastered ego. And I don't think that's entirely possible as a human incarnated. I don't think so. But
not until you reach full enlightenment.
And yeah, there's not very many people that have done that. So,
well, there are some.
There are some
yogis that have done that. And while
they have,
we're hearing this discussion about people that are waking up versus being woke,
isn't that a funny distinction? You wouldn't, it's odd because you think it's the same thing, but in reality, it's not.
Right. So people waking up are not what I'm hearing them refer to themselves as being enlightened. Because for me, from my background, enlightenment is full on enlightenment, where the ego is no longer in play. So as long as you're still dealing with ego, from my understanding, from my spiritual studies and my spiritual work, you are not enlightened.
No, I don't think so. There was a time when I had to put an end to a relationship within the parameters of this labor. I needed to put an end to the relationship, and I wasn't sure how to approach that. And I thought, I don't want to do this until I can feel ego not involved. I want to be able to voice this without ego. So when it came time to actually do that, and I was discussing this, the words absolutely came out completely wrong. And it sounded exactly like, a spoiled ego. I can't get what I want, so I'm not going to play this game anymore. And that was completely not how I wanted that to go. That was a test and it didn't work out. So I've got to go back. I'm looking at that again. I don't think I'll be able to fix it other than in the spiritual realm. But it's funny. I thought, when I have an opportunity to do this, it's going to come from my truth and not my ego. And that did not work. It was so weird. I thought, who is this talking? It was terrible.
Yeah. Well, in those moments, we can be our worst critics.
Yeah.
And our worst judgers. And so just remember to be kind and gentle with yourself, because the awareness heightening about it is a huge step forward. And we often don't give ourselves enough credit for the awareness heightening.
That's true. And so, yeah, I was aware of where I wanted to come from. But
yeah, takes practice.
It does take practice, and
that's why they call it a spiritual practice.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And I need to practice more.
But be careful of what you ask for, because you'll get a lot of opportunities to practice.
I don't really want that now. I've got too much else to do it, please. Let this lesson be learned really fast and let's move on.
That's great. So are you feeling complete with this labor, or is there anything else coming up that just wants to be given a voice?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so here we go again. You'll notice that I have updated this slide to include all of this information, which I'll get to in a minute, and all of this information, which I'll get to in a minute. So let's come back over here. So in the hero's journey, we know that we're in the second act still, the initiation act, and that Vogler, who created the initiation act and the return act, and quite frankly, the first act I can't remember the name of because it's been so long since we looked at it. But then another gentleman whose name I can't remember took each of these acts and broke them down into individual steps. And that person's name is in one of the past classes. I just can't pull it up right now. So in this initiation act, we have gone through crossing the first threshold, that step. And when we started crossing the first threshold, that's when phase 2 of the 6 phases of the Mars synodic cycle began. These challenges, the tasks of the masculine. And after the first labor, then we went into step 6, test allies and enemies. And you can see last month we completed the 8th labor that completed this step of test allies and enemies. Now we're approaching the inmost cave. This is where the hero gets closer to his goal. We're going to look a little more deeply into that approach, into the inmost cave, but that's what's happening with this 9th labor. Once this 9th labor is over, this phase 2 of the Mars synodic cycle is complete. So when we go to step 8, the ordeal, phase 3 of the Mars synodic cycle is going to begin. And while it's called phase 3, it's really the 4th of the 6 cycles, because in the Mars synodic cycle, we start with phase 0, then we go to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So it's the 4th phase of the 6 phases. And in the ordeal, step 8, the hero faces his biggest test of all. So that's what we have to look forward to when Mars enters the underworld on Monday. And while we are surrendered to the underworld, you'll see that the resurrection point for the sacred masculine doesn't happen until October. That's when Mars conjuncts the sun. That's why this month we are working on the 9th labor, and next month, September, we'll look at the chart for Mars entering the underworld. And then in October, we'll see what's going on with that resurrection point. Before we finish the ordeal in phase 3, then Mars leaves the underworld in November. And then we start a whole new step, and a whole new step in the hero's journey, a whole new phase in the Mars synodic cycle. So remember, this Mars synodic cycle is 24 months long. That's 2 years. So this is why, we're spending such a long time in these phases. Phase 2 was 1, 2, 3. Well, it was nine months. Phase 3 is generally approximately 4 months. Then phase 4, look at this. Phase 4 ends when Mars enters the sign of the archetype. So that's why this phase is going to take 5 months, because this phase is not complete. Since we're in the Mars Aries archetype, we have to wait until Mars comes back into Aries again before that phase completes. And then we'll talk about the return act and the final phase of Mars when we get closer to that. But you can see that this takes us into almost the middle of next year.
Yes, it does.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we move forward in the classes, I'll leave this side here just as a reference point, but we'll be moving through this side over here. Okay. And somehow my Mercury in Aquarius was able to create this slide, which I have to give myself a pat on the back for, because taking the 6 phases of the Mars synodic cycle and blending it in to all of these, 12 steps of the hero's journey, there's like some kind of disconnect in the mind to be able to merge them together and follow them along together. Somehow, I'm telling you, it was my Mercury in Aquarius that had the genius to put this slide together. Because if I had to start from scratch, I'm not so sure I'd be able to do it again.
I hear that. Yes.
So how are you feeling? Are you feeling good in terms of where we are in the step with the approach to the inmost cave and the 9th labor, and where we're going to be on Monday with the 8th step, the ordeal, and entering into the underworld? I mean, this is a huge shift in energies for us to be going through 2 steps of the hero's journey in 1 month, because we've been going through 1 step of the hero's journey for 7 months. So I just want to impress upon you the impact of this energetic shift that we're going through this month.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm feeling the between space, I'm always really aware when something is falling away and something hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
And it's a very uncomfortable place to be.
Yeah.
Trying to let go of something, and before you know what's coming to replace it, or in fact, what's on the horizon. Right. It's really humans, like I said, it's the ego doesn't like that.
Right.
It wants to know.
The ego is resistant to change.
Yes.
So if you're starting to feel stubborn because you're being resistant to change, that's your ego. Anytime your shadow side is showing up, it's ego. Let's just make it simple.
That is a good way to look at it.
right? When you have
Right.
no more shadow, you're fully enlightened.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So at this point in my life, I'm probably not going to be that.
My sister
Um,
is hysterical because she always says, I'm never going to ascend. I'm never going to ascend.
I
Her
know.
sun sign is Leo.
Oh, fortunately, we're not all going to have an option to fail.
That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of it. Because if you think about, like, let's just take a simple hibiscus bush that's filled with beautiful, full bloomed hibiscus flowers.
Yeah.
And then amongst the leaves are the little green buds that haven't even opened yet. So it doesn't matter what stage you're at, you are going to be fully bloomed. You cannot not become fully bloomed.
And that's the beauty of it, as you said. Yeah. It's not an option. There is no failure.
Right,
So,
right. So again, be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, because
absolutely.
you've got this. We are eternal beings, right? This isn't,
We are.
100
Yeah.
lifetimes and done. We are eternal
No.
beings. We are eternally evolving and expanding.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really I like, I've heard it for so long now, is that people who incarnated at this time on Earth knew it wasn't going to be easy. The soul understood the challenge,
Yes.
and they said, "Yeah, I'll take that challenge, and I'll go on the fast track."
Yeah.
This is in effect a fast track
Yeah.
for growth. So we all need to give ourselves some accolades here, some attagirl,
Absolutely.
and because we took the challenge. We're
Yeah.
here because we wanted to do this.
We are
And
heroes and heroines because we chose
we
to
are,
do this.
every single soul here. And that is a really interesting idea to contemplate right
Absolutely.
now. So, and it helps me be compassionate.
Yes.
It helps me be tolerant.
Yes.
It helps me do a lot of things that I would not normally do.
Yeah. Helps
But
you to be patient.
very, yes. And understanding that everybody is
Everybody's
really,
doing the
we
best
are,
that they can.
they're doing the best they can, and that's why they're here. And we need to encourage all of that, and be very, very compassionate,
Yes.
even when it looks like they're not, they are.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and people probably look at me and say, yeah, yeah, of course. People look at me and say, well, she's off on the wrong track. I mean, they don't feel that it's valid. That's the word, valid.
Right.
So,
and as soon as we start making those kinds of judgments, our shadow is engaged.
Absolutely. And we see a lot of shadow. Yeah. Not just our own, but and that's okay. We knew that. Right. We may not remember that, but we did know that.
Right.
So, yeah.
So we've got to remember the old phrase, people who live in glass houses should not throw rocks.
Throw stones,
or throw stones. And we all live in glass houses.
Every one of us. It's what we moved into. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that into the awareness of this circle, because it's really something that people need to be reminded of. It's something that we have to remind ourselves of. I'm constantly having that kind of mental chatter going on with myself when things start feeling a little overwhelming or tough. I've got to talk myself, off the ledge sometimes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. So I just want to say, and I'll go back and correct this, that I see a little typo here. This is supposed to say August 9th, not August 10th. So I'll correct this before I post the slides, okay?
Okay. Okay.
All right, so approaching the inmost cave. Now, this is the link where I found this, and the woman who wrote this did a really good job because she's using the movie The Wizard of Oz, and this scene in The Wizard of Oz where, you know, Dorothy and Toto are going into the Wicked Witch of the West castle, and then, you know, Toto escapes, Dorothy gets caught, and Toto escapes and goes and tells the allies, right? The cowardly lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow, and they have to muster up their courage to go in and rescue her. So that's kind of the framework, if you want to kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we're reading through this, that the woman that wrote this piece used to emphasize these different points regarding the approach to the inmost cave. So we're just going to read through this really quickly. I don't like to read a lot to people, but in this case, because this is a whole new step and we really need to get comfortable with it because it's the step that we're in right now. Remember, this was activated on the 9th of the month. Today's the 20th. We need to kind of dig into this a little bit. So in the approach to the inmost cave, the hero, or let's just clarify, heroine, okay? So when I say hero, I'm also meaning heroine, has adjusted to the special world. That was the word I was looking for, the special world,
Oh,
right? That's not the ordinary world, it's the special world, and goes on
right.
to seek its heart. We're seeking our heart in the inmost cave. Wow. And she's using she because she's talking about Dorothy. So just remember, that's why she's using this pronoun in the article. She passes into an intermediate zone with new threshold guardians and tests, right? When Dorothy approaches the Wicked Witch's castle, there's those flying monkeys there guarding it, right? Remember them? How scary they are?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She approaches the place where the object of the quest is hidden and where she will encounter supreme wonder and terror, according to Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey Mythic Structure. Remember, this hero's journey was all designed by this gentleman, Christopher Vogler. She must use every lesson learned to survive. So all of those lessons that we've learned over the past 8 months while we were in the test, allies, and enemies step, we're going to be called on to use to help us survive in this inmost cave. All right. The hero often has disheartening setbacks while approaching the cave. She is torn apart by challenges which allow her to put herself back together in a more effective form for the ordeal to come. Remember, the ordeal is when Mars goes into the underworld. That's the next step. And that's happening on Monday. Okay. So as we're discussing this, think back to the Lion's Gate until now. What kind of disheartening setbacks may have come up for you? In what ways were you required to take some of these lessons that we've learned to get through them? She discovers she must get into the minds of those who stand in her way. If she can understand or empathize with them, the job of getting past them or absorbing them becomes much easier. The approach encompasses all the final preparations for the ordeal. So everything that we've done from what month was it when we had the first labor? Last December. everything from last December through today, right? And through tomorrow, that full moon tomorrow is significant because it's before we go into the underworld. So everything from Christmas Eve day through tomorrow, that full moon in Aquarius, is helping us to prepare for the ordeal, which begins on Monday with Mars going into the underworld. It brings the hero to the stronghold of the opposition, where she needs to use every lesson she has learned. There is an eerie region around the inmost cave where it is clear that the hero has entered the shaman's territory on the edge of life and death. Yes, this is the edge before we go into the death by intent phase. And you and I, with that Scorpio goddess overtone, we have the gift of the shaman, the shamaness, of being able to walk between these worlds of life and death. The approach raises the stakes and rededicates the team to its mission. The urgency and life or death quality of the situation are underscored. The reader's assumptions about the characters are turned upside down as they see each person exhibit surprising new qualities that emerge under the pressure of the approach. And of course, in The Wizard of Oz, the cowardly lion finds his courage. The Tin Man, who has no heart, finds his heart. Well, what is this about? This is approaching the cave to seek its heart. And the scarecrow, what was it that, didn't have any brains. He finds his intelligence, right? So these are the surprising new qualities that emerge under the pressure of this approach that we have been experiencing since the Lion's Gate. So if it's not clear to you how this activation of the approach to the inmost cave has been working you, then maybe through the full moon meditation work that you are doing tomorrow, that I'm going to do tomorrow, we may have some revelations illuminated by the full moon work that we're doing. And definitely when we have the personal session and we look at where all of this is activating your personal solar return chart, you'll get some more clarity on that as well. So how are you feeling about this approach to the inmost cave?
I'm anticipating it to be a good one. I mean, I'm feeling really positive about it, and I feel like I've done this before. You know, I've approached the cave many times. I've gone in.
Right.
You know, I feel confident that that I'm going to be fine, that it's going to be fine.
And so I'm just going to take this moment to remind you, when we were in France in 2019, Mars and Venus were in the underworld together. And think about this approach to the inmost cave and recall what happened to you when we were in that cave.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I'm losing the word, let me find it. That Templar showed up and spoke through you. And remember when you were like astonished because you're like, I've never done that before. That's not characteristic of me.
I do. I will never forget that experience ever, where I was so tempted just to keep it to myself. not explain or try to tell people what I was feeling, as we were all in that cave dealing with whatever. And so I was almost tempted not to say it because it just seemed so unreal, but I did. And everybody else came through too in the ways that they were feeling it. And it turned out to be, I was so grateful to feel that power, that strength, that protected energy, that was coming into me, the feeling of not only being protected, but protecting. And that was very masculine. It was, really supportive of the female, but masculine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it speaks to this piece here where that surprising new quality emerged. And remember that happened. It was only our second day, maybe our third day there. This was at the beginning of that journey.
Yes. Yes, it was. And I needed that for the rest of the journey. I needed that very much. And it helped me a lot.
Right. Because we had not yet come into contact with the ordeal.
No, we had not. That was to come.
That was to come.
And every one of us did.
Yes, we all faced the ordeal.
We did. It was so interesting when you look back at it.
Yeah.
It wasn't at the moment. I mean, it was just so difficult, but it's so interesting now. It's clearer as 2020 is in hindsight,
Yes,
but
yes. And it's interesting because we always looked at it through the lens of the sacred masculine and the Venus journey. We haven't looked at that experience through the lens of the sacred masculine and the Mars journey. Whole new layer of insight coming up.
It is a whole new layer, and it brings into my mind Michael, that he was there as the masculine, and we didn't all appreciate that. I mean, we understood, but appreciating was something else because he was so emphasized during that trip as having something more important than anyone else. And so we had to look at that imbalance. And because of that, I think it was harder for us to understand his role. I mean, you seem to grasp that better. I was always, trying to feel my own way and being redirected all the time, and it was not easy.
Right.
Yeah.
So for anybody who's listening to this class after the fact, just to clarify, our group was all women and one man. And so she's speaking about Michael, the one man that was there as the sacred masculine to serve and support us through that journey.
He did such a fantastic job of that. And I just love him dearly for that.
Absolutely. And then remember that we went to the Abbey of St. Michael, where Archangel Michael was present. And of course, Judy's experience.
Judy did.
So the masculine energy was really very present through that Mars and Venus underworld experience. And again, for people that are just listening to this for the first time, this Mars and Venus being in the underworld together at the same time only happens every 34 years.
So we had no idea what that was going to look like. And when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see. Right.
You can't see. There's too much, it's the old expression, you can't see the forest for the trees. You just cannot.
I could not, but I can now.
Yeah.
And so the two of them, the masculine and the feminine, working together is much clearer now than it was. Thank goodness, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's amazing when you have an experience where that actually happens, where they work together.
Yes.
It can become unbalanced if you're, it can become unbalanced, and because that's, you've never experienced that. And if you've been coming at things from the divine feminine, which after all my training, that's what I was looking at, right? We were all
Right.
looking at the divine feminine, Mary Magdalene. Out the way it did.
Yep.
It was amazing.
Yep. Now think about this. I'm 58 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Venus and Mars coming into the underworld together happens only every 34 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's never happened before in my lifetime.
Right.
Before that event.
Right. Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let me make
I
it so clear. It would have happened when I was 22. So it was only the second time, the only second time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having problems with numbers as I am with time with these Aquarian energy. So it would have been the second time. So it'll be interesting. I should take some time to go back to when I was 22 and think about what was going on at that time, because that would have been the first time that they were in the underworld together. And then 2 years ago would have been the second time. So unless I live to be 90 years old, which is my full intention, I will not have that experience again in this lifetime.
I know I won't, for sure. It's interesting to me that after that masculine energy was expressed through me, when I went into the Abbey, the one I just adored so much, what was the name of that one?
The Abbey for St. Michael?
Was that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
The one that had been restored. Okay, right. Yeah. So went in there and I was feeling isolated because all the signs were in every single language except the one I spoke. And I think we mentioned that a couple of times. Why, it's not just Americans that speak English. Why wouldn't they include English translation as well as these other languages? So when I went into the chapel, what sign did I knock over? Do you remember that?
The no talking sign.
The silence sign.
Or the silent sign, yes.
Yes, that was the only sign in English. And I knocked it over. And it was just so perfect,
perfect. And that voluminous space, from the front door to the end behind the altar, and those ceilings must have been 20, 25 feet high or 30 feet.
Oh,
how high were those ceilings?
It reverberated
all the way around.
I just swung around with my backpack and just whack. It was so funny, but yet I was just, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've spoiled the pristine sacredness of the chapel.
The silence has been broken.
Oh
yeah, that was something else. That was some kind of synchronistic event that held a very loud message.
It did. I am so sure of that. Yes. Yeah. We were not to be silenced. No.
That's right. That's right. Oh, wow. Well, the sacred feminine is not to be silenced any longer.
No, it will not. And she's not alone.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So here we go. Oh, we're just at the labor. Okay, so
Oh, I gotta stop talking so you can get.
it's okay. We're going to be fine. We'll speed through the next slides and you'll see why in a minute, because the aspects will be personal, and then I'll show you why in a minute. So for anybody watching this, just go out to this link for this video and move to this timestamp to watch this labor. As you may know by now, I paused the recording because I don't want a copyright strike for playing this video. So let me go ahead and pause the recording now, and then we'll come back and discuss it afterwards. Okay, and let me move to the next slide. Whoops. Yeah, whoops. There we go. Okay, so what's fascinating about this particular labor is that it involves the Amazon women. And for people who do not know who the Amazons were, there is this book. I actually bought it. I haven't read it yet, but I bought it. It's called Searching for the Amazons, the real warrior women of the ancient world, by this man, John Mann. And so let me just read this really quickly, written about this book, because it gives you a background on the Amazonian women. Since the time of the ancient Greeks, we have been fascinated by accounts of the Amazons, an elusive tribe of hard-fighting, horse-riding female warriors. Equal to men in battle, legends claimed they cut off their right breast to improve their archery skills and routinely killed their male children to purify their ranks. For centuries, people believed in their existence and attempted to trace their origins. Artists and poets celebrated their battles and wrote of Amazonia. Spanish explorers carrying these tales to South America thought they lived in the forests of the world's greatest river and named it after them. That's the Amazon River, of course. In the absence of evidence, we eventually reasoned away their existence, concluding that these powerful, sexually liberated female soldiers must have been the fantastical invention of Greek myth and storytelling. Until now. Following decades of new research and a series of groundbreaking archaeological discoveries, we now know these powerful warrior queens did indeed exist. In searching for the Amazons, John Mann travels to the grasslands of Central Asia, from the edge of the ancient Greek world to the borderlands of China, to discover the truth about these women whose legend has resonated over the centuries. So these are the women that Hercules was sent to by the daughter of King Eurystheus. Her name is Admete. I can't pronounce it, but you'll hear it in the video. And she was kind of, she looked up to Hippolyta, the queen. Here's an image that I found of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazon women. And she wanted this gold and leather belt. So this gold and leather belt was actually gifted to her by her father, Aries, who is the war god. They call it a girdle, but it's a belt. And Aries gifted it to his daughter, Hippolyta, to ensure that she would never fall in battle and to ensure her victory in battle. And so Admete, the daughter of King Eurystheus, who is looking up to and kind of heroine worshiping Hippolyta, is the one that sends Hercules to the Amazon women to get this girdle for her, this magical girdle for her. So what happens when they get there, of course, Hercules and the warriors that he took with him. Because remember, the idea was that these are fierce warrior women that they're getting ready to confront. So Hercules takes a bunch of warriors with them. And when he gets there, he's surprised that they're not ferocious and that they're very hospitable and they're offering them food and shelter. And so Hippolyta has heard of Hercules, is fascinated by him and is interested in what he's been doing. And so he's thinking, I cannot take this girdle from her. Maybe if I tell her the truth. And so he does. He tells her that he's sent there to get the girdle as one of his labors. And as a sign of friendship, she gladly offers the girdle to him and gives it to him. But remember, the whole reason that Hercules is undergoing these labors is because Hera, who is the wife, the consort of Zeus, Hercules' father, is so angry at Hercules that Zeus has had another child through infidelity with another human woman. And so going back to the first labor, we learn about how Hera has gotten King Eurystheus to send him on these labors. And so she's so angry that the Amazon women have been so nice to them that Hippolyta just hands him the girdle. This is too easy. And it enrages Hera. So she turns herself into one of these Amazon women. She goes in amongst them and she starts sowing these seeds of distrust, telling them that they're really there to kill them all and to kidnap the queen and take the queen back. And that's when the Amazon women turn on the warriors that Hercules brought with him, starts killing them. Hercules hears the commotion. He thinks he's been tricked by Hippolyta. He hits her with that club that he got in one of the earlier labors, kills her because he already has the girdle in hand. She's already turned it over to her, so she's no longer protected by it. And then they, go back and they give the girdle to the daughter. And so what was interesting to me is, one, these Amazon women that are very strong archetypes of the sacred feminine. And in fact, the Aries archetype of the sacred feminine is the Amazon woman, the wild woman, the fierce protectress. So it's interesting to me that at this stage, as we're approaching the inmost cave, that we have to take the sacred feminine with us. And this goes back to what you were saying previously about the balance between the feminine and the masculine. But what has happened here is this betrayal, this anger, this sense of being tricked, the treachery, coming into, culminating into murder is what comes out of all of this. And so I think that speaks to these shadow aspects that we were talking about that can rise up when you go into the ordeal in order for you to have to deal with them, to transmute them and be resurrected with them having been turned from shadow to light. So, and of course, we know that this labor is happening in the sign of Virgo. So we see here some of the shadow aspects of Virgo, and of course the positive aspects of Virgo. So having gone through that recap and having dug into these Amazons, what's coming up for you, Maureen, around this labor as we approach the inmost cave?
I can't help but think about Afghanistan. Yeah, it's playing out on the stage, the world stage right now. Exactly this. Really interesting to look at it like that. We can see it. We hear it every day. Anger, treachery, betrayal, and murder. Afghanistan. Yeah. And it's weird because when we went into Afghanistan, obviously we were warring, right? But they started to work with us. And when the Taliban, or who they saw as the enemy, was forced into retreat, they began to work with us. And now there's no collaboration again. Everybody sees this differently. And so if you watch it, you can see that this labor is happening. I mean, it's happening in other areas too, but this is the most obvious place. Don't you think so too? Don't you see it?
I find it interesting that through our activation of the heart chakra, the gate of compassion, you were speaking to this, and now here it comes again. And subsequent to that, Amanda Ellis did a whole program on what was going on in Afghanistan. You said you had watched it. I haven't had a chance to watch it now, but now I'm inspired and intrigued to watch it. And I guess my question to you is there anything from Amanda Ellis's recording on Afghanistan that you recall that even ties into this labor?
Well, obviously holding the highest intent, the highest possible intent for the people of Afghanistan. Whereas, these people have been hospitable, is the word that's coming to me, to the forces that were there, not just American forces, but there's been other countries too, that were there protecting, and they worked with them. They were definitely like the Amazons. They were working with the peacekeepers after the war, after the Taliban had been forced back. Okay, so then it looks like he turns on him, like Hercules turns on the Amazon leader. I mean, it looks like that's what's happening over there. We're turning our backs on those allies. They were allies, and it looks very bad right now for what's happening. That's probably not clear, but
well, so let me see if I can, because I'm not watching this, okay, and you are. So I just want to poise something here for you to maybe help bring some clarity to this. We know in the labor that Hera is enraged that this is going too well. So think about that in terms of what's going on in Afghanistan. Who might be the ones that are enraged that things are going well? And so goes in, in a disguise, right, to sow seeds of discontent. Who might those be that through the sowing the seeds of discontent, the result is that the administrator of our country made the decision to pull out our warriors, our military? You see what I'm saying? And you find correlations there in terms of what's actually transpired? Because I'm not watching it. So I don't know details of how all of this has happened.
Yeah, it happened about as fast as you could possibly imagine. Now, I've been through this before. This is exactly how we left Vietnam. Exactly. I mean, it is completely down to the last people running after the planes and trying to get on the helicopters and scared out of their mind. The distrust has been seeded. I'm trying to think of who might have done that, but I mean, there are many, many people in Afghanistan who want the soldiers, the warriors gone, so they have been seeding fear into people that they're not going to get out. They're not going to get help. They're at the mercy of the forces of evil. That's kind of what it's looking like.
Right.
It is exactly the same thing.
Well, in terms of Vietnam and Afghanistan,
Mhm,
the Hera
mhm.
of those events is that three-letter agency known as the Clowns in Action.
The clown.
Clowns in Action, the three-letter agency, was behind Vietnam and, of course, Afghanistan, because of all of the money that was being made off of the heroin from the poppy.
Right. So that's what's happening. Exactly. They are being fed these ideas of treachery and betrayal. Certainly betrayal is a big part of this. It was in Vietnam as well.
And they both go back to that same three-letter agency. And of course, all of that was about money. They needed money to fund their dark ops.
Yes, they did. And they had help, getting to that point within the structure of assisting, helping. Afghanistan was the war was started obviously because of 9/11. Now, if you look deeply into 9/11 and you wonder, if who exactly was wanting that war, that was that a false flag? And I don't want to trigger anybody here because I understand that not everybody's on board with the false flag theory. But nonetheless, that was what triggered the war. Somebody wanted that war.
Yes, and if you accept the premise that 9/11 was a false flag, also about money to get that gold out from underneath the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
It was used as an excuse to start the war in Afghanistan, again, going back to money.
It seems like it's always money.
Right. But the three-letter agency is just the layer that we can see. It's the puppet masters above that we don't see. They're the true Hera. The three-letter agency is the disguise that Hera takes to be able to infiltrate and sow the seeds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what's going on. So it does look like the ninth labor is playing out on the world stage. I think that's getting clearer all the time.
Right.
So, yeah.
So what I would encourage you to do, and I will do myself, and of course, anybody watching this is invited to do the same, is take that awareness heightening around the parallels between Afghanistan and this specific labor, and go back and look at this screen here about the approach to the inmost cave
Okay.
and see the pieces that are connecting here to help you uncover what's being activated within you through this approach. Does that make sense? What I'm asking you to do?
Yes.
Yeah. So even though Mars is moving into the underworld on Monday, we will still have the residual energies of this activation on the 9th going in with us. Because remember, with the previous layers, the window for the labor was that full month from one labor activation to the next. Now we're not going to be having another labor activation, but the residual energies of this labor activation is going into the underworld with us. And so that's kind of a lens that we can look through if we choose to, and to frame what we're going to be experiencing in that underworld experience. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Now, Amanda was, was offering, or was helping to achieve the highest level of outcome, the highest level possible, which in this case was the safety of the women and children, the masculine, the feminine, the allies, ensuring their safety, which is up to us to hold that intent.
Yeah.
That's what that was about mostly.
Yeah. Well, and look here, I'm going to come back to this in a minute. When you're going into the underworld, it's that death by intent, but you have that resurrection point and you come out of it transfigured and reborn. And so if we hold what's going on in Afghanistan and we carry it into the underworld with us, then can we transfigure what's going on there and rebirth what's going on there? It's just a question that I'm posing to you, and it may somehow tie into this next matrix that you're going to birth at the new moon in Virgo in September.
Yes, I agree. I don't know, words aren't coming.
Yeah, it's
So.
okay. It's okay. We can talk about it more in your personal session and at the group session too. Because I think it's highly significant. This is the second time it's come into your awareness. Last class with the sacred feminine, and now this class with the sacred masculine. And it's clear from this labor that the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine are to be engaged.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes.
And isn't it interesting that we're in the Mars Aries synodic cycle, the fierce protector, where the Amazon women are the representation of the Venus Aries energy, the fierce protectress.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a balancing message there too, that we're in this specific archetype in the masculine journey, and in this labor, the same archetype shows up as the feminine through the Amazon women.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I will.
There's a lot there to contemplate.
There is a lot. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at this activation of the labor.
Okay.
This is really powerful because, first of all, on the path of the quest mate, we have this T square, and all of that energy along the opposition, the North Node in Isis here, Juno there, being funneled towards the activation, Moon and Mars in Virgo. That's huge. So this is a point of destiny, we know, in terms of the evolution of the collective consciousness of humanity, because the North Node is involved. This is the feminine energy. There's Isis, Sophia, there's Juno, the goddess of sacred partnership. All that feminine energy in that opposition on this path of the quest mate, the masculine and the feminine questing for each other to be able to come into relationship with each other, and all of that feminine energy being driven towards that Moon Mars sacred masculine activation as it's getting ready to approach the inmost cave. Can he and will he take the feminine into the cave with him? And what's supporting him as he does that? Moon and Mars in trying to Osiris, Isis and Osiris, the beloveds, Sophia and Christ, coming into sacred partnership to support the sacred masculine in coming into partnership with who? The feminine, Osiris and square to Saturnia, breakthroughs in consciousness. How can I bring in the wisdom of the divine feminine and have the wisdom of the divine feminine be there in partnership with me as I'm in this cave? I mean, you can't make this stuff up, Maureen. This is happening in the sky. This is the creator, right? The great creator, absolute source, choreographing this cosmic dance to bring the energies into the fruition of what's happening right now. And this is what it looks like here. So here's the activation, Moon and Mars in Virgo at the focal point of this T square, right? North Node in Isis and Gemini, standing across from Juno. That's the top of the T. Here's the stem of the T. All of this energy and this opposition on this Gemini Sagittarius path of the questmate being funneled, focused right into the activation. And what do we have here? Not one square, but two squares, two opportunities for breakthrough in consciousness that can happen for the sacred masculine here. And remember what Leela mentioned in our last sacred feminine class, that the trust in the sacred masculine is going to happen through the feminine, because there's been so much distrust that has been sown by patriarchy. And so for humanity and for the inner feminine and the inner masculine of human beings to move from the distrust of patriarchy to the trust in the sacred feminine, the bridge between the two is the sacred feminine.
Okay.
And then we see here, this is that trine from Osiris to the sacred masculine. So he's got those Christ energies flowing into him, supporting him as he's going into the cave. And what is he bringing in for him? Here's that square to Saturn and Aquarius. He's bringing in the wisdom, right? Saturn as the goddess of Capricorn, the wisdom of the divine feminine, bringing it in from these higher realms, from our multi-dimensional fields.
Okay.
So we'll talk, because we're running short on time right now, we'll talk about these other aspects when we look at your personal chart and go
Okay.
through them, but they're here for whoever is watching this. What I do want to point out here is we've got this square between the Magdalene and Pluto. And so this speaks to that bridge that Leela was talking about, to be able to rebirth from seeds of distrust. You have to cross the bridge of the sacred feminine in the sign of Libra, that balancing, the bridge, the balance to get to the trust in the sacred masculine. And it is by embodying Sophia that that's going to happen. That transformation, that transfiguration, that rebirth is going to happen through the embodiment of the Sophia consciousness.
Okay.
So we'll get into this much more deeply, because we see here that our allies, Arthur and Merlin, are communicating with Sekhmet, the goddess of cosmic justice, and through grace and mercy, and Mercury, the cosmic messenger. So what will the allies have to share with us, communicate with us from this fire energy, the compassionate heart, and this quest for the highest spiritual truth, Sagittarius? Okay. So this is the slide that talks about the ordeal. And we're not going to go through this now, because remember, we're not talking about the Mars event going into the underworld until next month. And this step 8, the ordeal, is related to that. I'm only putting it here so when you go back and watch this, or when you look at the slides, you've got the information, because this is happening on Monday, so that you can be aware of it. But we'll go into this in detail in next month's class. Likewise, the same for this phase 3 of the Mars synodic cycle, when we're surrendering to the underworld. So here's a quote from Daniel Giamario, who downloaded this information on the Mars synodic cycle that explains what this surrender to the underworld phase is about. And these are the 3 astrological events. We know that this first one is happening on Monday. This next one is happening in October, and this last one is happening in November. So again, just kind of a preview of what we'll be diving into next month.
Okay.
So these are the Vision Quest opportunities that you have available to you. And so utilizing the energies of the 4 aspects engaged with the 9th labor. So let me explain that. This is the activation of the labor. We've got the opposition, we've got the T-square, we've got this trine, and we've got the square. And we know that all 4 of those aspects have specific energetic impulses to them. So looking at these aspects, looking at the astrological keywords for these luminary bodies that are involved in this labor activation, discern a personal message for you from the sacred message. This should say sacred masculine. I will fix it.
Okay.
That's my brain. From the discern a personal message for you from the sacred masculine, related to your approach to the inmost cave. Now you've got the slide that tells you what that's about. So what is the message that you're getting related to that? And then again, using the same as above, this time from the masculine allies. Okay, so let me bring this back up here. These are the masculine allies, Merlin and Arthur, trining this opposition on the mastery path of relationship equality. So using, the effect of an opposition, using the effect of the trine, looking at the energies of Merlin and Arthur, Sekhmet, Mercury, and Jupiter, okay? What you want to do is you want to discern a message, personal message from the allies, Merlin and Arthur, related to the mastery path of relationship equality, right? What is that path about? It's about no more hierarchy. I know myself to be a master, and I see you as a master, and we relate to each other as equals, not looking up to through that hero worship that the daughter of Eurystheus had towards Queen Hippolyta, and not looking down on you as an underling who, is my slave or my worker bee, right? Equality. I'm a master, you're a master. We deal with each other as equals. So what do Arthur and Merlin have to share with you around that? Okay. So our next support group is next Saturday at 2:00 Eastern.
Okay.
And these are our September classes. The Sacred Feminine, we're going to be looking at activation of the throat chakra, the 5th gate, on Monday, the 13th in September. And then we're going to be looking at this underworld, September 18th, this Saturday, that next class, going into the underworld with Mars.
Okay. On the 18th.
On the 18th, yep. So, my dear, again, a whole lot. I mean, it's like you can kind of feel it building as we're preparing to surrender to the underworld, can't you? And this labor is like, even like the ante is like being what is the word that they say? Built up, being
anteed up, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get drained. You have to guard against that.
Yeah. Or also on the other side, it's easy to get overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed is a good word. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So just keep breathing. Just keep taking that next breath. Just keep checking into your heart space. Just keep grounding into the earth.
Okay.
And don't bite off more than you can chew. Right?
Boy, that's for sure. Yeah.
If you're going to start contemplating this, take it in small pieces.
Right.
Yeah.
Very small pieces.
Is there anything that's come up for you that desires more clarity around anything we've discussed?
Not right now. No.
Okay.
No.
All right. That's good. So, whew, thank you for everything that you contributed to this class. I mean, just spectacular.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a real busy time in terms of what I'm working with, and I like to speak to it. I lost energy there somewhere. It just flowed. It was just gone. I need to look into that and see what that is all about. But
yeah, I get that.
Yeah, it just all of a sudden I was just deflated. Yeah. So I think overwhelmed is a good word. I can see that I retreat. Shoot. So I'll be working with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fortunately, this particular gate activation is happening in Virgo. Remember that Virgo is the sign of the high priest and the high priestess in service to the sacred feminine. So again, no surprise that the Amazon women showed up at this labor. So, go back to what that Virgo energy is all about. It's about working with the rhythms, the cycles, creating sacred space, doing ceremony, doing ritual, using your sacred medicine tools, whether it's, chanting, whether it's your cards, whatever it is that you use to connect in with the unified source field, with your sacred inner masculine and your inner feminine, whatever tools like that you use the Virgo energies to ground you, right? Virgo's an earth elemental sign. So, and the ceremony will help ground you.
Yes, I'm very aware that I have neglected my drum, not my sacred drum as much as my djembe, which I've learned made for me by our priestess sister,
Yes.
Annette.
Yes.
And she made a drum that was dedicated as a shadow drum. And I need to drum again. And that's been coming through. That's a tool.
Yeah.
And I've neglected that.
Great awareness.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And so I'm gonna try to go back into that again and review what I've learned from her. She went from the djembe to she's now a Boran drummer, the Irish drum, which I started with. It's what I started with. And then I went to the djembe, which has the African. And if you really, really look at who the drummers were, they were the women, and so that I need to do that, picture those magnificent women on their djembes,
Yeah. Sounds like a good plan.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, just knowing the first step relieves some of that overwhelm.
It does, because it's the ego that tells you you've got to know it all now. You can't go forward if you don't know it.
Right.
And I fight that. I mean, I don't fight that. I am aware of that, which is different. So understanding that it is not necessary to know what's going to come. You don't have to know. Just take that first step.
And Pallas Athena there guiding you from one step to
yes,
she knows.
I do. She does know, and I'm just trusting her.
Yeah.
To bring that through to me, and not get bogged down in whatever it is that is whispering to me to sabotage. Right.
Yeah.
That's part of it too.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
All right, my dear. Thank you. Thank you so much for everything. It's really spectacular.
Thank you. It was a wonderful lesson. Really a good one. Thank you.
We've got this. We know how to dance in the shadows. So we've got this.
We do know how. We've done it a lot. So yes, we know how to do this. So.
Yeah. All right. So I'll see you on Saturday for the group session.
I will be there. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.